This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight, fugitive captured. A convicted sexual offender is caught in Italy and brought back to Nova Scotia to serve the remainder of his sentence. Cleaning up Victoria Park. We take a look at restoration efforts nearly 2 years after post-tropical storm Fiona tore through the province. And the RCMP issues a public apology to African Nova Scotians for the historic use of street checks.
Sun and clouds set for Tuesday, but a chance for showers and thunderstorms developing into the afternoon. Your full forecast details are coming up.
Good evening. A former Halifax cab driver is back in prison tonight. Bassem Al-Rawi fled Canada 2 years ago when he was supposed to be serving out his 2-year sentence for sexual assault. He was picked up in Italy last year and returned to Canada last Thursday. Blair Rhodes has our top story tonight.
Bassem Al-Rawi was in the midst of preparing an appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada when he decided to skip the country instead. He had surrendered his passport and was supposed to be living with a surety in Ottawa. But Al-Rawi was able to obtain new travel documents from Iraq. He and his family flew from Canada to Turkey, then on to Baghdad. Last year around this time, he was vacationing with his wife and infant son in the Verona region of Italy, about 100 kilometers west of Venice. That's where Italian authorities picked him up.
He's been incarcerated in Italy for the past year while he's been fighting being extradited back to Canada.
Last week, the Italian Court of Appeal rejected his bid to block his extradition and sent him back to Canada, where he's resumed serving his 2-year sentence.
He is only extradited on the matter on which he fled, which he had been convicted of, and that's the sexual assault charge. And that due to extradition law principles, new charges cannot be added on.
Jennifer McClellan says Al-Rawi's recapture sends a message.
If you are so fortunate as to be released on bail, that you have to abide by those conditions. And if you don't abide by those conditions and you do flee, then you will be sought. And in this case, we're pleased that Mr. Al-Rawi has been brought back to Canada to face justice.
Even before he fled the country, Al-Rawi was the subject of controversy. He was acquitted in a separate sexual assault case that drew national headlines and street protests here when the judge said, clearly, a drunk can consent. It was the furor surrounding that case that prompted the victim in this case to go back to police, which led to the charge that resulted in this conviction. Blair Rhodes, CBC News, Halifax.
Nova Scotia Power is facing a penalty of $1.25 million for failing to meet performance standards in 2023. It missed 3 out of 14 standards set by the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. Power outages were too long and too frequent, and it took too long to connect new services. The utility is not allowed to recover the cost of the penalty from ratepayers. Rather, it has to credit the penalty to customers through a mechanism used to adjust power rates. Nova Scotia Power has never met its performance standards in the 7 years since they've been implemented. It has been fined 3 other times, but this year's fine is the largest. In a statement, Nova Scotia Power CEO told CBC he recognizes the utility needs to do better and it's working hard to make improvements. Nova Scotia is experiencing a spike in the number of cases of COVID-19. In the respiratory watch covering the period from July 21st to August 24th, the province reported 746 new cases of COVID-19. That's up significantly from the 362 cases reported between June 24th and July 20th. An infectious diseases expert says this kind of increase is to be expected.
We did see this last year, end of August, beginning of September, when people were heading back to class and getting together more, we think inside. And so that happened last year, going to happen this year, is already happening, maybe a little earlier this year than we had expected. And if things follow last year, we'll have this bump in September and again in November, December. So.
And I'll talk to Dr. Lisa Barrett about how the symptoms of this COVID-19 variant compared to previous ones. That's our newsmaker just after 6:30. So Ryan, after a pretty soggy and windy weekend, it was nice to see the sun again.
Yeah, it definitely was. And there was a lot of rain this weekend, Amy, especially along the Atlantic coastline. Have a look at the numbers. I mean, we had some spots that did exceed 100 millimeters. Blockhouse, not far from Bridgewater, and in the Hammonds Plains area, a couple spots there that did exceed 100 millimeters, and widespread 70, 80, 90 millimeter amounts in the Halifax area as well. And you can see for the northern areas, not as much this weekend, but we all had a pretty good drink, which made the sunshine Monday, and of course the sunshine tomorrow will be welcome. But tomorrow we do have, or Tuesday, we do have that chance for some showers that are going to be developing into the afternoon with a risk of a thunderstorm as well. The greatest risk is going to be from Keji in the west through the valley to the South Shore, and then across through the Halifax area and out into Cape Breton. Let's time it out for you, and you can see we've got a frontal boundary approaching through the day on Tuesday. So that'll build the clouds up into the afternoon. There are those showers that are going to develop into the afternoon. The greatest risk for those thunderstorms will be central and eastern areas of the province. And then as this front moves out, by the time we get to Wednesday, smooth sailing, lots of sunshine, maybe a lingering shower chance blowing in onshore for Inverness County and into Cape Breton, but overall very quiet for Wednesday and Thursday. And Friday, we'll time out your full forecast details with your 7-day in a couple of minutes, Amy.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, nearly 2 years since post-tropical storm Fiona tore through many parts of Nova Scotia, restoration work is still underway at Truro Victoria Park. Countless trees were lost and several trails washed out in the storm, along with severe damage to infrastructure like staircases and gazebos. The CBC's Brooklyn Curry stopped by for a tour of the park and an update on how that cleanup is going.
We've lost a lot of our trails have been washed out, and the crews are constantly working on erosion control for those. We've lost some walkways and gazebos, and we're working tirelessly to get those back to where they were. The park staff here over the last 2 years have just done a tremendous job opening the trails. The cleanup, it's still going on. It's going to be probably another couple of years before everything's cleared up, but we've got her under hand now. This tree here was damaged in Hurricane Fiona, and we're going to preserve it as a wildlife tree. We're going to carve up the top a little bit to make it look like it happened naturally, and yeah, save it for wildlife and habitat, nesting birds, cavity dwellers, insects, and various fungus. We've got one of the largest stands of hemlocks in Nova Scotia in the park. We've got 3,000 acres in here and 40,000, 50,000 mature hemlock trees. It's probably one of the few places in Atlantic Canada where you can see trees of this size and this age in a park setting where they're accessible to the public. The loss of hemlocks in some of the areas has just been devastating. So there are areas in the park that will probably never be open again. Yeah.
You think that's one of them?
That could be one of them. Before Hurricane Fiona, this entire area would have been totally blocked out by light. It would have been a lovely shaded hemlock forest, and now it's totally exposed, and we've got sunlight coming through, and it's a totally different environment here now. This was just a giant pile of trees entangled, and the crew has been working for 2 years every day around the park cleaning up areas just like this. A lot of the areas that were heavily impacted were very hard to access, and some of the local contractors used low impact forestry equipment. We had a great team of arborists come in here and do a lot of challenging logging work on the hillside. You can imagine how treacherous this area would be to run a chainsaw up there on that cliff. They scaled down here with ropes and saddles and chainsaws and did a lot of logging like that, and they would have winched it up to the top of the hill. This area here in the lower park has been closed off since Hurricane Fiona. There's a high risk of rock slides along the bank here, and we have contractors being issued a contract to install retaining walls. So those are stumps from hemlocks that have rolled down the hills, and that's what we're left with. We can still do some work in here, but for the most part, I'd like to keep the stumps in here, and when they break down, all that soil goes back. It's all a bonus for the forest in here. So these trees in the brook here, Leper Brook, to get those out would have more of a negative environmental impact than it would be just to leave them there. So in this brook, we've got Gaspro and brook trout running in it every year. It would do more damage if we got in there to remove that than it would just be let nature take its course from at this point. Very much looking forward to everything being open and the reforestation projects that are happening. So next week we have 46,000 seedlings being planted in the areas that were heavily impacted by the hurricane. A lot of people have an emotional attachment to the park, and it'll never be the same as what it was, but they're very positive with where we're going and what the park's going to look like in the future.
The IWK Health Centre says it has received the single largest individual donation to healthcare in Atlantic Canada. $25 million has been given to the Children's Hospital to go towards mental health and addiction services. The funding will be used to create a separate area at the new emergency department for mental health crises, as well as connect 8 integrated youth service sites around the province. It will also be used to expand existing services for individuals whose condition requires prolonged support beyond what is offered by outpatient care.
They are the area that we've identified as being the most in need in our province. Our current waits are close to a year. We don't have any other waits that are that long in the province in child and youth. There's been so much amazing improvement, and this is the last area of our ecosystem where we know we need more supports. We need to really think about our spaces. We need to bring the services together so that we can meet the needs of our kids in the province, but also in the Maritimes who need this intensive care.
This donation is going to affect all the children in Atlantic Canada, and it's just so heartwarming to know that they are there for us as well.
The money was donated by Berna and Myron Guerin. The couple lost their 13-year-old son, Michael, to cancer in 1975. In 2015, the Guerins donated $50 million to the Toronto hospital where Michael was born. Well, ferry crossings between PEI and Nova Scotia are back on schedule, but earlier today and over the weekend, a number of crossings by the MV Surima were canceled because of the wind. Wayne Thibodeau looks at why the wind poses such a big issue for that ship.
Weather wreaked havoc once again today on crossings between PEI and Nova Scotia. More than 400 reservations have been canceled since the weekend, most because the Surima had to be taken out of service.
It's very frustrating because I appreciate the frustrations customers go through.
Officials say the Surima simply isn't as good in the wind, but because it's still down one of its 4 main engines, its ability to operate in the wind is further compromised. Joyce says it can operate in winds up to 25 knots. That's about 46 kilometers an hour. The Confederation is good up to 30 knots, or about 55 kilometers an hour. Joyce says once the Surima's 4 engines are operating, something he hopes will happen in the next couple of weeks, it should have a similar tolerance to the wind as the Confederation. But the Surima has other challenges.
It is more directionally dependent, I would say, on the Surima than the Confederation, just because of how little hull's actually under the water, just the shape of the hull. So if the wind is from astern, it affects the ability for the captain to keep the vessel on a steady course.
Business leaders are concerned.
The feedback we're getting from our membership is really confidence is well drained on the system. It's hard to plan at all. Using the ferry for business purposes.
And Aiken says the cancellation of the evening crossings also creates challenges. The last crossing of the day is 6:30 p.m., even during peak season.
I hope this doesn't become some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where, the traveling public's down, the ferry service is of no use anymore. Well, it's a question of what came first. I mean, the lack of dependability has pretty well undermined any confidence that the traveling public had in the service.
The Chamber wants assurances from Ottawa that the building of the new ferry is on schedule. It's not expected to be ready until at least 2028, and its replacement, the Fanafjord, will be in service next summer. That, it says, may start to rebuild confidence in the struggling ferry service. Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Wood Islands.
Passenger flights between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick are back on thanks to a new service from Quebec-based airline Pascan. Today, officials gathered in both Halifax and St. John for the inaugural flight.
Pascan Aviation, we're a regional airline based in Montreal, Quebec. We've been operating since 1999. We currently serve 6 destinations in the province of Quebec, and now we're opening up here in the Maritimes. We're starting, as of this morning, Bathurst, St. John, Halifax, and in October we'll be starting Sydney, Halifax. So pretty excited to be here this morning. The goal is to bring regional aviation back to the Maritimes. So a lot of the bigger airlines, they got bigger airplanes. They left the markets a couple of years ago. It left this void. People were moving in 2019. Pandemic came. We want to get people back on the airplanes, out of their cars, a little more safe, faster, more economical. So, really give the service back that you had pre-pandemic. Well, right now you're going to see 2 flights, early morning and later in the afternoon, return to Halifax. So people from Halifax will have option of 2 flights a day, and the same from St. John and Bathurst to Halifax. I think every airline has taken a hit since the pandemic, and everybody's still trying to crawl back out of that hole, if you will. It's, the cost of everything has gone up, access to pilots, flight attendants. The labor market is very difficult right now. But for ourselves, we really pride ourselves on what we do, on-time performance. We're a group of very passionate people. We're about 200 employees at Pascan, and our objective is to be here every day, on time, all the time.
Nova Scotia RCMP have apologized for their historical use of street checks on African Nova Scotians. This comes 5 years after a study found Black people in the province were 6 times more likely to be stopped by police than white people. And I'm joined now by Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly, Commanding Officer of the Nova Scotia RCMP. So first of all, could you talk about the timing of this? Why did the RCMP choose now to apologize a full 5 years after street checks were banned in this province?
Yes, I came back to the province in about 2 years ago, and certainly it was a priority for me. I've served half my career here in Nova Scotia. I recognize the contributions of African Nova Scotians. For me, it was a personal journey and a personal decision that I wanted to apologize. I can't speak for those that were proceeding before me. I did explore reasons that an apology was not issued back when Halifax Regional Police issued their apology, and I didn't find any reasons to be valid. So I took it upon myself. Policing evolves and we learn more and we need to do better. And so about 18 months ago, we launched our process in which to engage community that led to the apology issued on Saturday.
Were you surprised at the time a few years ago that the RCMP did not follow Halifax Police's lead and issue an apology?
Yes, I was surprised. I was in a role in our national headquarters where I had oversight of provinces as well, or input, not so much I had input on the provinces, and I was advocating that an apology be issued at that time. Obviously, there was no apology, and so when I had the opportunity and the leadership here in the province, I took it upon myself to issue the apology.
Now, CBC spoke to some folks at the event on Saturday, and some said even with the apology, they feel anxious around police. Did you hear that as well?
Yes, we heard that significantly in our community consultations, the anxiousness, the impact, the true impact of any interaction that's negative with the RCMP or any police for that matter. Street checks itself, the word street checks wasn't used very frequently. It was just talking about a negative interaction, whether that be on the phone, whether that be at the courthouse or what have you. So that I'm not surprised by that comment. I'm not naive that this is a step. We're willing to collaborate and cooperate with community. We need community in order for our role as promoting public safety. I'm hoping that this is a step in the direction of rebuilding that fractured trust. That will take time, for sure.
Okay, so you've made this step. What are the next steps?
So part of the process and part of my announcement in the apology was to talk about the action plan. So we've got a 5-step action plan that revolves around education of our employees, not only our employees here, but across the country. Then we look at recruiting and retaining African Nova Scotians. We have a large recruiting drive on right now, and we'd love to recruit specifically from the African Nova Scotian communities, whether as a police officer or somebody in support of policing. We're also taking a look at race-based data collection, for instance. And so for the RCMP, we've never collected race-based data. So we're hoping that, and we're in the initial pilot phases in other areas across Canada. And once that becomes broader, we'll be able to gather that information and learn from what the data is saying to inform policy and training and that sort of thing. So together with being more present in community has told us that they want us present. They want good policing. They want fair and equitable policing, but they also want to see us as human beings and part of the community. So the invitations to, sporting events, galas, faith, spiritual things within community is what I hope increases as well as part of our action plan. And finally, reporting back to not only my steering committee, so our steering committee will stay in place. The action plan's for 3 years. The steering committee wants to stay in place. We'll be reporting not only to the steering committee, but also to the community and the public at large over that time period.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Coming up, the NDP defend their Montreal by-election candidate after an image of the Palestinian flag appears on a pamphlet. And Trump versus Harris, what to expect from tomorrow night's historic presidential debate. Not a bad-looking evening out there. Ryan is up next with his weather forecast. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Just a picture-perfect September day today.
It really was.
We deserved it after, kind of a wild weekend.
It's always the way, right? Yeah. The weekend, Saturday was very wet, obviously, in case you missed it earlier in the program, talking about how heavy those rainfall totals were. As much as 100 millimeters in and around the Bridgewater area. Hammond's Plains also picked up 100 millimeters. And kind of a widespread 60 to 90 along that much of that Atlantic coastline. But
we got a break.
We got a break today and a pretty good forecast moving forward.
Good.
So let's break it down. We'll start with the
it looks pretty nice, doesn't it?
webcam shots. Yes, live look in Lunenburg. Beautiful evening in Lunenburg, of course, always beautiful there. But really lovely out there right now. And temperatures in Lunenburg are 17 degrees. It's 18 in the metro area, 19 in the valley, 20 at Pictou, and that Caribou Point Station, one of the warmest spots in the province right now as we look at those current winds. And you can see sustained in the 15, 20, 30 kilometer per hour range, especially down here in the Eastern Shore region. Now looking at the gusts, it's not too gusty, just a bit breezy out there right now. But those winds will ease as our latest system in the frontal boundary that it's attached to is going to be moving its way out. Now, as we look at the bigger picture across North America, this is Francine, which is going to be making a hook to the east and, looking set to make landfall along the Gulf Coast with some very heavy rain over the next couple of days. So keeping an eye on that. And another low out west, as we can see, no doubt where the cold front is there, 16 in Calgary at 33 degrees in Regina, 31 in Winnipeg. Summer-like heat continues there. That heat will continue to push its way eastward. We're not going to get that warm, but temperatures are on the rise for us here locally as well over the next few days. Here's how temperatures are going to play out for tomorrow morning. 8 to 12 degrees with winds generally light overnight tonight. Couple of fog patches. Now note the timeline here as we move through hour by hour. We will be seeing things clouding up at times, becoming a mix of sun and cloud pretty quickly throughout tomorrow morning from west to east. And then those shower chances will work their way in. Digby, Yarmouth, into western areas of the valley late morning into the afternoon. But the greatest risk will be here throughout the afternoon as we see the development of some scattered showers, heavy downpours, the risk of some thunderstorms with this line that's going to be working its way through. Cape Breton getting into the mix later day, more so into tomorrow evening, but giving you folks the heads up, obviously, you're putting it on the icons, even though it is probably going to be closer to supper and beyond. 19 to 22 across Cape Breton for tomorrow with those winds in from the southwest. Antigonish near 23 tomorrow in through central parts of the province. Temperatures ranging between 19 and 22 degrees as well. And we'll be watching temperatures to be in a similar range for western parts of the province on your beautiful Tuesday as well. Now, note that temperatures may be as chilly as 17 in those onshore winds for places like Liverpool. Wednesday did put a chance of a shower lingering for Cape Breton, especially for Inverness County, as you'll see the model picking that up. And temperatures across the rest of the mainland, 18 to 21 with mainly sunny skies. This is how it times out. So the front moves through, looking at that nice clear out, and there again are those shower chances that are going to be not only for Inverness, but that is going to be the greatest risk. Maybe an isolated chance back towards Guysborough County as well. Northwest winds will keep temps a bit cooler on Wednesday, and then that area of high pressure will move in. It'll move off to the east, and that is going to allow that southwest wind to move its way in. So that'll bump our temperatures up through Thursday into Friday. And then for the weekend, at this point, it looks like the clouds may build up a little bit on Saturday with an isolated shower chance. That, thanks to a weak little boundary that moves through, will likely drop our temperatures a little bit for Sunday, but overall, still hanging on to the high teens and some low 20s. So not a bad looking 7-day forecast right there, Amy.
No, it looks pretty good. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, up next, I'll talk with Dr. Lisa Barrett, and I'll ask about the recent jump in COVID-19 cases in Nova Scotia. That's our newsmaker. Stay with us. You're watching CBC Nova Scotia News. COVID cases in Nova Scotia have more than doubled over the past month. The province's latest update is reporting 746 new cases, and that's up from 362 cases the month prior. And there have been 21 recent outbreaks at long-term care facilities. I'm joined now by infectious diseases expert Dr. Lisa Barrett. So what do you make of the jump in COVID cases in the most recent update? What do you think of that?
Yeah, totally expected. We did see this last year, end of August, beginning of September, when people were heading back to class and getting together more, we think inside. And so that happened last year, going to happen this year, is already happening, maybe a little earlier this year than we had expected. And if things follow last year, we'll have this bump in September and again in November, December. So totally expected, very annoying for those who are getting unwell, and certainly still an important health challenge for people who are older or who have a poor immune system. There's that much COVID out there.
Well, how contagious is this latest variant of the virus?
I kind of sound like a broken record on this, but it seems like every time I say it's very contagious, it is very contagious. And that's what viruses do. As we build an immune response, that pushes the virus to evolve into something that transmits more easily. And certainly the in the lab assessments of these viruses do seem to be that they are very, very infectious. Does it matter exactly what the difference is from the last version? No. Chances are, if you're in an inside space with somebody who has COVID for, an hour, you've got a really good chance of at least getting infected. If you're vaccinated, hopefully not as sick, but it is very, very contagious.
Well, what are the reports of the symptoms? Are they similar to previous strains of COVID?
Seem to be not a big difference, and certainly not one symptom that would make you say, aha, I have the new strain of COVID. Importantly, again, some, runny nose, sore throat, sore eyes, muscle aches and pains, fever, a cough, and sometimes more of a pneumonia for people who may be more at risk. Some people have also still mentioned some diarrhea type symptoms. So that is something that can turn up, even though we call it a respiratory virus. And of course, in the older person, there may also be fatigue, lethargy, meaning no energy. And in some who are quite a bit older, confusion can happen as well. So nothing that's going to point you in one direction or the other necessarily from flu versus COVID versus this other virus, respiratory syncytial virus. But certainly if by proportions right now, it's mostly COVID that's circulating. So if you're sick, there's a good chance you either have another corona or common cold virus or COVID.
Well, should folks think about getting vaccinated now, or should they wait a little further into the fall?
That's an interesting point. The spring campaign of vaccines that continued into August has now stopped. There is a pause at the moment. Health Canada had asked the provinces to pause and destroy the old XBB vaccines for COVID that they had on hand. And we do not yet have an approved updated COVID vaccine yet. And so that means at the moment, in most provinces, not all, but most provinces, if you go looking for a COVID vaccine, you won't find one at the moment. But when they do become available, as you might expect, it does look like they are going to provide updated and quite good protection against the circulating viruses around at the moment. So definitely do consider getting vaccinated when they become available. But right now, in most provinces, there isn't a COVID vaccine that would be available to you at the moment.
Well, with school back in, I wanted to ask you about whooping cough now being on the rise. What do people, especially parents, need to know about that?
Yeah. So again, whooping cough You can get it, you can be infectious just before your symptoms, you get symptoms, and eventually over the course of a couple of weeks, you get this cough that has a whooping sound to it. And the cough can be very, very severe. The people who get sickest, again, are those who are oldest, in poorest health, have underlying lung problems, or those who are very, very young. So babies close to birth, or babies without a great immune system, or young people like below the age of 2. If you do have a child or a parent, friend, family member who has those symptoms, do get checked out with your family doctor or primary care provider. It is a vaccine preventable infection. And so it is included in general childhood vaccine. So if your child's on a regular vaccine schedule, they will get it. If you've got an older parent, make sure that they're up to date, or a family member who's older, make sure they're up to date with their vaccines, because that is the key part of not getting pertussis or whooping cough. That's the other name.
All right. Well, Dr. Barrett, thank you as always. We do appreciate it.
Yes, and hopefully folks out there will keep getting tested and find some COVID tests in their communities for those especially who are at high risk. We do have therapies that they can access, and they can still self-report if they can't get to a lab test. So make sure you've got some of those COVID tests on hand for the fall.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, disgraced fashion mogul Peter Nygard is sentenced to 11 years in prison for his sexual assault convictions. Welcome back. An NDP by-election flyer is causing a stir. It shows Craig Sauvé, the NDP candidate for a Montreal riding, in front of a Palestinian flag. The caption, which is written in French, says a vote for him is a, quote, vote to stop the genocide in Gaza. Olivia Stevanovich has more.
Just a week before Montrealers head to the polls in this hotly contested riding, one of the leading candidates is getting attention for sending a new campaign message.
It is a positive development that political parties are starting to see support for Palestine as an electoral benefit rather than a liability.
But the move is also receiving condemnation.
To have anybody, any candidate for any party, putting out literature with a flag of a foreign entity seems to us to be unacceptable.
And political opponents are pouncing too. Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman asking on X, formerly known as Twitter, whether NDP leader Jagmeet Singh approved of the pamphlet.
The radical NDP is once again dividing Canadians with incendiary and extremist rhetoric that puts the Jewish community at risk.
The backlash prompting the NDP to go on the defense, saying it's, quote, ludicrous to suggest that when a politician is seen with another flag, it's un-Canadian, pointing to photos of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, photographed with flags from other countries, though none of the images were produced in an election pamphlet.
NDP may do whatever they want.
Criticism also coming from the Bloc Québécois, a party with its hopes set high for next week's by-election, too. A competitive race with the conflict in Gaza front and center.
There's a lot of people who have family in that region. Who live in Montreal.
This columnist says the NDP's decision is a strategic move after more than 50 Arab and Muslim Liberal staffers signed a letter announcing they will not campaign for a party that, quote, excludes us and our values.
And so that's what they're trying to do, is trying to basically win over the Liberals by being bolder in their stance on the war in Gaza.
With polls showing the NDP has a chance of winning LaSalle and Verdun, New Democrats will find out if their strategy pays off next Monday night. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Air Canada says it's making plans to suspend flights next week as the company and the pilots' union remain far apart in negotiations. If no agreement is reached, either side could issue a strike or a lockout notice as early as Sunday, September 15th. Wages remain a key sticking point. The company has called Airline Pilots Association's demands excessive. The union says Air Canada should come to the bargaining table instead of threatening to disrupt flights. The ALPA represents more than 5,200 pilots at Canada's largest carrier. Air Canada and Air Canada Rouge operate about 670 flights daily. Former fashion mogul Peter Nygard has been sentenced to 11 years in prison by a Toronto judge. Nygard was convicted last November on 4 counts of sexual assault. Jamie Strachan has more.
Justice Robert Goldstein called disgraced fashion mogul Peter Nygard a sexual predator who used his position of power and wealth to take advantage of women, calling it a Canadian success story gone very wrong.
Justice Goldstein sentenced Mr. Nygard accordingly and found him to have committed these sexual assaults in a way that makes him, as we have been saying, recognizes the description of him as a sexual predator.
In the sentencing, the judge called Nygard a narcissist who felt entitled to do whatever he wanted. Nygard was convicted of sexually assaulting 4 women in the private bedroom of his Toronto fashion headquarters between the 1980s and mid-2000s. One was just 16. Victims advocate Shannon Moroney read a statement from one of the women.
We did this to ensure every victim of sexual assault will remember this trial and feel the strength and confidence to come forward and not be threatened by social status or money.
Dozens of women from around the world have alleged they were assaulted by Nygard. He faces charges in Manitoba, Quebec, and the United States. Some of those alleged victims were here in court for the sentencing.
Many of us have waited for this day.
for quite a few years. For me, I'm a 21-year survivor. I've been waiting for this day for 21 years.
The 83-year-old wore a black Canada Goose parka with a hood over his head, his bearded face shielded by a visor. He declined to address the court. The judge mostly rejected calls for leniency based on Nygard's age and failing health. Nygard's lawyer promises to appeal the conviction and the sentence.
So he's just going to continue to defend himself where he can, appeal where he can, and continue to maintain his innocence in all of these matters.
For Nygard, this marks the end of a stunning fall. Once a rich and powerful player in the fashion world, now likely to spend his final years in prison. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
2 men have been sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for their roles in the 2022 border blockade in Coutts, Alberta. It was one of several that popped up across the country, protesting COVID-19 rules and vaccine mandates. Chris Carbert was convicted of public mischief and possessing a firearm dangerous to the public peace. Anthony Olenek received the same sentence on the same charges and was also convicted of possessing a pipe bomb. A jury found them not guilty of the most serious charge they faced, conspiracy to murder police officers. Neither men will have to serve their full sentences. Both were given nearly 4 years credit for time they've already spent in custody. U.S. Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris and Republican nominee Donald Trump are gearing up ahead of the first and possibly only debate before the presidential election in November. They'll go head-to-head tomorrow night in a high-stakes matchup in Philadelphia. Richard Madden has more from Washington.
Trump is not fit to be president again.
On the eve of the high-stakes debate, Vice President Kamala Harris launching this new attack ad airing in key swing states, using words from Donald Trump's closest advisors to make her case.
It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
Ahead of the first and possibly only face-off between these presidential contenders, there's tremendous pressure on both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris to make their case to American voters in an election that polls suggest is neck and neck. Trump's advisors are urging him to focus on economic anxieties, blaming the Biden-Harris administration for runaway inflation, lax immigration, and high cost of living, and to avoid stoking conspiracies, lying, and personal attacks.
Well, I think that when he stays on the issues, policies, absolutely, those are the winning issues. Because again, whether it's crime, whether it's the border, whether it's Israel.
Harris has been trying to define herself as a clean break from the angry, divisive politics dominated by Trump, aligning with some policies from the Biden administration while distancing herself from others. Her advisors are urging her to stay focused and avoid taking the bait from Trump's distractions.
The less we're talking about him and the more we're talking about you, the better it's going to be for the vice president, because she has laid out an agenda. Things like making sure that our tax code is fair and protecting a woman's right to choose.
Now, both candidates are portraying themselves as agents of change, despite the fact Trump was once president and Harris is vice president. These undecided voters say they'll be watching very closely.
I haven't swayed who I'm going to vote for, but I still want to hear what all parties have to say, though.
This debate is really tight, and they're both very strong candidates. I'm a victim of gun violence, so I stand for all what she has to say on that topic.
Now, the debate format is 90 minutes. There'll be no studio audience, and microphones will be muted when the other person is speaking, giving voters, especially those critical undecided ones, an unfiltered moment to hear from the two candidates with two starkly different visions of the country. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Catherine, the Princess of Wales, says she's finished her chemotherapy treatment. She made the announcement in a video posted to social media.
You lead the way. As the summer comes to an end, I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment. The last 9 months have been incredibly tough for us as a family. Life as you know it can change in an instant, and we've had to find a way to navigate the stormy waters and road unknown. The cancer journey is complex, scary, and unpredictable for everyone, especially those closest to you.
She says she is now focused on doing what she can to stay cancer-free and will be returning to some public duties in the coming months. In March, the princess revealed she'd been diagnosed with an undisclosed type of cancer and was undergoing preventative treatment. We're back after this short break. That's a pretty fine-looking forecast for the next few days.
It really is. Yeah, after the weekend that was so wet, and yeah, we actually have a pretty good pick taken on the weekend.
Okay.
Some ominous clouds. Now have a look at this. We're going to zoom in on the eastern shore for our viewer picture of the day. This one from Port Hilford. And a beautiful shot here.
Oh, that is very ominous.
Yeah, from Daryl. This is an Arcus cloud. It kind of looks more like a shelf cloud, which is a type of Arcus cloud, but a bit of a roll cloud look to it as well. But either way, super nice, super great shot. Thank you to Daryl for sharing. Ryan's picks at cbc.ca. So yeah, tomorrow, another chance that we'll see some shelf clouds out there with the potential for some thunderstorms tomorrow for mainly areas from, say, the Annapolis Royal region to Keji down towards, say, the Liverpool area and east of that line. More like a shower chance for Digby, Yarmouth, and Shelburne counties. 19 degrees there. Most of us will be into the low 20s. And for Wednesday, recovering quite nicely. Temperatures 18 to 21 across the province, so a bit cooler with a northwest flow. Let's time it out. There's the forecast, as you can see, for the Tuesday time frame as it clouds up. Chance for showers developing, and then that risk for thunderstorms with those darker yellows and oranges. And you can see that front moves out. By the time we get to Wednesday, we're looking at that fresher air moving in with that isolated chance of a shower for Cape Breton. For Thursday, looking at a nice day as well. High pressure dominating, lots of sunshine, temperatures on the rise. Thursday into Friday, back at least edging into the mid-20s. I think we will see a few spots there. Bit of cloud moving in for Saturday, but overall looking like a drier day. And then for Sunday, nice one shaping up.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know, it was Surf's Pup this past weekend in California. Have a look. That's just one of dozens of dogs that hit the waves in San Diego, decked out in costumes and goggles while being cheered on by their owners.
They were participating in the Surf Dog Surfathon. It's the longest running dog surf competition in the United States. It all raises money for local animal shelters.
They're pretty talented.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Take care.